Some people don't disappear because they are cold. They disappear because staying hurts too much. From the outside, it looks sudden. It looks harsh. It looks selfish. One day they were replying. They were present. They were trying. And the next day, they were gone. No explanation. No closure. Just silence. If you have ever cut everyone off, this is about you. And if someone disappeared from your life without warning, stay. Because understanding this will change how you see them. And maybe how you see yourself. People who cut everyone off are rarely impulsive. This decision is not made in one moment. It is not a reaction. It is not a mood. It is not sudden courage or sudden coldness. It is built quietly, over years. Long before they leave, they stay too long. They stay through confusion. They stay through discomfort. They stay through situations that don't feel right, but don't feel bad enough to justify leaving. They tolerate what hurts them. They normalize what drains them. They explain other people's behavior instead of protecting themselves. They tell themselves to be patient, to be understanding, to not overreact. They convince themselves that what they feel is not that bad, that other people have it worse, that their pain does not deserve attention yet. They wait. They adjust. They shrink their needs. They learn early that expressing pain is dangerous, that needing too much leads to rejection, that speaking up creates conflict. So they adapt. They become easygoing. They become flexible. They become the person who understands everyone. They become quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because they have learned that saying less keeps the peace. They become strong, not because they feel strong, but because no one else is holding them. They carry their feelings alone. At some point in their life, they learned a painful lesson. Connection comes with a cost. Not everyone grows up in a safe emotional environment. Some homes look normal from the outside. Clean walls, family photos, a front door that closes. But inside, the air feels heavy. Inside, every sound means something. Every silence feels dangerous. Every small mistake feels like it could explode into something much bigger. In these environments, children learn to scan the room before they speak. They listen to footsteps. They watch facial expressions. They feel shifts in tone. They learn when to speak and when to disappear. They become emotionally intelligent too early. Not because they want to, because they have to. They learn that love is unpredictable, that safety is temporary, that attachment comes with risk. So their nervous system adapts. This is where the pattern begins. When a child grows up needing to manage other people's emotions, they learn that their own emotions are not important. They learn to minimize themselves. They learn to survive quietly. They learn that being low maintenance keeps people around, that being invisible avoids trouble, that asking for less means getting hurt less. They learn that peace is fragile, and their job is to protect it. They learn to read between the lines, to feel tension before it is spoken, to anticipate needs before anyone asks. They become responsible before they are ready. As children, they don't think of this as trauma. They think of it as normal. Because when you grow up inside an environment, you don't question it. You adapt to it. You don't ask why your chest tightens when voices rise. You don't ask why your body freezes during conflict. You don't ask why silence feels safer than honesty. You just learn to survive. And survival looks like compliance. It looks like maturity. It looks like strength. But inside, the body is always alert, always listening, always scanning, always preparing for something to go wrong. This is not a personality. This is a nervous system shaped by unpredictability. As these children grow into adults, they often look strong, dependent, self-sufficient. They don't ask for much. They don't complain. They don't demand attention. People admire them. They say things like, "You're so mature, you're so calm, you're so understanding." But inside, They are exhausted. They are tired of explaining themselves, tired of being misunderstood, tired of being the one who always adapts. They become the listener, the fixer, the one who understands everyone else. But no one learns how to understand them. So they keep giving chances. They stay when it hurts. They hope things will change. They believe that if they just explain it better, if they just stay calmer, if they just give it more time, something will finally shift. They believe connection is earned through endurance. They believe love means tolerating discomfort. They believe leaving is failure. Until one day, something breaks, not loudly, not dramatically, silently. This is the moment people don't see. The moment they stop explaining. The moment they stop hoping. The moment they stop fighting for connection. Healing for people who cut everyone off does not start with reconnecting. It starts with safety. Not the idea of safety. Not the promise of safety. Actual, felt safety. Because when someone has lived their whole life managing emotional unpredictability, their body does not trust words. It trusts patterns. Their body has learned that closeness means vigilance, that intimacy means monitoring, that connection means responsibility. So when people say things like, just open up, just communicate, just trust again, it doesn't land as encouragement. It lands as danger, because to their nervous system, closeness has always come with a cost. These are people who learned very early that relationships require performance, that love requires effort, that acceptance requires self-control. They learned that staying regulated was their job, that keeping things calm was their responsibility, that their discomfort was less important than everyone else's comfort. So as adults, they often don't even recognize when something is hurting them. They only recognize it when they are already overwhelmed. Their threshold is high. Their tolerance is extreme. They don't leave at the first red flag. They don't leave at the second. They don't even leave at the third. They leave when their body shuts down. And that shutdown doesn't look like anger. It looks like silence. They stop responding. They stop explaining. They stop negotiating their needs. Because explaining never worked before. Because negotiating always meant compromise. Because asking for space always came with guilt. So their body chooses the only boundary that ever worked: disappearance. People misunderstand this silence. They call it avoidance. They call it immaturity. They call it emotional unavailability. But what it really is protection. When someone has learned that expressing discomfort leads to punishment, distance becomes communication. Silence becomes language. Not because they want to hurt anyone, but because they don't know how to stay without hurting themselves. For a long time, cutting people off feels like relief. Their nervous system finally gets a break. Their chest loosens. Their sleep improves. Their thoughts slow down. For the first time, there is no one to manage, no one to anticipate, no emotional temperature to regulate. And that relief is real. This is why people often isolate longer than they intend to. Because the calm feels unfamiliar, but necessary. But over time, another feeling appears: loneliness. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind that shows up in empty rooms, in moments when something good happens and there is no one to tell. In the absence of being witnessed. They don't miss chaos. They don't miss conflict. They don't miss emotional labor. They miss resonance. They miss being understood without explanation. They miss being held emotionally. But their body still believes that closeness equals danger. So they stay in the in-between, not fully alone, not fully connected. They scroll. They distract. They intellectualize. They tell themselves they are fine, that they don't need anyone, that independence is strength. But independence without choice is just another survival strategy. This is where guilt often enters. After cutting people off, guilt does not mean regret. It means attachment. They replay conversations. They question themselves. They wonder if they overreacted, if they were too harsh, if they should have tried harder. But guilt does not mean they were wrong. It means they cared. The problem was never that they felt too little. The problem was that they felt too much without support. When they finally leave, people often say things like, "You changed. You became cold. You don't care anymore." But the truth is they cared too much for too long. They stayed when leaving would have been healthier. They gave when they had nothing left. Cutting everyone off is often the last boundary of someone who never learned how to set boundaries safely. This behavior is common in people who experienced emotional neglect, not necessarily abuse, not always chaos, often something quieter. Parents who were physically present but emotionally unavailable, caregivers who were overwhelmed themselves, homes where feelings were minimized, ignored, or dismissed. Children in these environments learn that their inner world is inconvenient. They learn that emotions complicate things, that needs create problems. So they learn to self-soothe early. They learn to rely on themselves. They become low maintenance, agreeable, invisible. They are praised for it. They are called easy, independent, mature. But what is praised as maturity is often self-erasure. As adults, this turns into extremes. They don't know how to ask for a little because they were never allowed to have a little. So it becomes all or nothing, connection or isolation, overgiving or complete withdrawal, closeness or disappearance. Moderation feels unsafe because it was never modeled. Healing for people who cut everyone off does not look dramatic. It does not arrive as a breakthrough moment. It does not sound like forgiveness or sudden confidence. It arrives quietly. It begins when the body starts to feel just a little safer than it did before. Not safe enough to trust everyone. Not safe enough to open completely. Just safe enough to stay present for a few seconds longer than usual. For people who learn to survive by disappearing, healing begins with staying. Staying in a conversation when the chest tightens. Staying with a feeling without rushing to explain it away. Staying connected to themselves even when discomfort appears. This is not about forcing connection. It is about building tolerance. Tolerance for emotions. Tolerance for needs. Tolerance for boundaries. Because these are people who were never allowed to have limits safely. They learned that limits caused conflict, that boundaries led to punishment, that saying no resulted in withdrawal of love. So they learned to say nothing instead. Healing asks them to unlearn that silence is the only protection. It teaches them that boundaries can exist without disappearance, that they can step back without cutting everyone off, that they can ask for space without burning bridges, that they can be honest without losing connection. This learning is slow because it must happen in the body. The nervous system does not change through insight alone. It changes through experience, small experiences, saying no and not being punished, expressing discomfort and being met with curiosity, taking space and being welcomed back. Each of these moments teaches the body something new. It teaches the body that connection does not always equal danger, that closeness does not always lead to overwhelm, that being seen does not automatically mean being hurt. But until those experiences exist, distance will feel safer. This is why healing often looks like a middle ground that feels unfamiliar. Not full isolation, not full enmeshment, something in between. And that in between can feel deeply uncomfortable. Because when someone has lived in extremes, moderation feels unsafe. They are used to over-functioning or withdrawing, over-giving or disappearing. Balanced connection feels strange. It feels uncertain. It feels exposed. Because there is nowhere to hide. This is where many people get stuck. They want connection, but they fear losing themselves. They want intimacy, but they fear being consumed. So they hover at the edge. They test. They retreat. They observe. They look for signs. Does this person respect my no? Do they listen when I say I need space? Do they become defensive when I express discomfort? Because for someone whose nervous system learned to scan for danger, trust is not given freely. Trust is built slowly, moment by moment, by boundary. This is why people who cut everyone off often appear guarded, even when they want closeness. They are not closed. They are careful. They are listening with their body. They are watching for consistency. They are watching for repair. They are watching for safety. And safety is not about never hurting each other. It is about what happens after hurt. Does the relationship make room for honesty? Does it allow space for mistakes? Does it respond with accountability instead of dismissal? For people who learned that emotions were dangerous, repair is everything. Because repair teaches the body that conflict does not equal abandonment, that discomfort does not equal catastrophe, that relationships can bend without breaking. This is how the pattern slowly changes. Not through force, not through pressure, through gentleness, through choosing connections that feel regulating, not activating, through noticing when the body relaxes around certain people, through allowing oneself to have preferences without guilt, through learning that needing less does not make you more lovable, and that needing more does not make you too much. People who cut everyone off often struggle with shame. Shame for being distant, shame for not replying, shame for needing space, shame for being overwhelmed. They have been taught that their limits are a problem. So healing also involves reframing. Reframing distance as information, not failure. Reframing withdrawal as a signal, not a flaw. Reframing sensitivity as awareness, not weakness, because sensitivity is not the problem. Lack of safety is. Highly sensitive people feel more. They process more. They notice more. In supportive environments, this becomes intuition, empathy, depth. In unsafe environments, it becomes hypervigilance, exhaustion, withdrawal. So healing is not about becoming less sensitive. It is about becoming more supported. It is about learning how to regulate instead of disappear. It is about developing tools that allow connection without self-abandonment. This might look like shorter conversations instead of silence, clearer boundaries instead of resentment, taking breaks. People who disappear are not broken. They are protecting something that was never protected before. They learned silence because silence kept them safe. They learned distance because closeness demanded too much. They learned independence because no one came when they needed help. Cutting everyone off was not the goal. It was the last option. And healing does not mean forcing yourself back into places that hurt you. It does not mean explaining yourself to people who never listened. It does not mean becoming louder, tougher, or less sensitive. Healing begins when you stop disappearing from yourself, when you notice your body instead of overriding it, when you feel discomfort and stay present instead of vanishing, when you allow your needs to exist without apologizing for them. You do not need to disappear to be safe anymore. You do not need to endure pain to earn connection. You do not need to carry everything alone to be worthy of love. The people who learn to survive by disappearing are not incapable of connection. They are learning how to stay without self-abandonment. And staying does not mean losing yourself. It means choosing places where you do not have to. If this felt like it was about you, it is because your nervous system recognized itself. And that recognition is not weakness. It is the beginning of coming back.